Greetings and welcome back to Custom Card Coverage, where we look at different custom cards from across the online Hearthstone community to judge new and creative effects. Today we'll be looking at one particular concept that should be familiar to all players of card games: countering and undoing effects. Hearthstone is admirably a game where players are given ample opportunity to play cards and work around their opponent's strategies. However, the different effects that a card can implement are not easily beaten, and often one strategy for defeating a card's effects leaves another weakness open. For example, let's say a priest plays a Witchwood Grizzly that his opponent promptly slays. The priest player would then have the opportunity to resurrect that minion. Simply destroying it isn't enough. Cards like Sap and Polymorph do a stronger job of eliminating the effects of a particular card, but even those cards are incapable of stopping battle cries. The only card in Hearthstone that does a ubiquitous job of cancelling another card is Counterspell, which is remarkable because it has its own keyword for it. Seriously, bold text and everything. Apparently Enrage is an effect that's too confusing, but Counter is a-okay despite never appearing in another card. However, this isn't without reason. A counter effect is inherently unfun. It's the equivalent of saying, you might be Superman, but I'm carrying Kryptonite. It makes for a more boring game overall. The only interesting part of Counterspell is the guesswork needed to figure out which secret is in play. As such, every play of Counterspell ends with somebody groaning. Either the opponent for not being able to play their high-cost spells, or the player when their opponent plays the coin. So, how can effects that reverse or alter the game end up looking when they're designed a little differently? For that, let's look at another case of the normal, the weird, and the game-breaking. Starting us off, we have Magical Kitty. 2-mana hunter spell, secret. When your opponent casts a spell, counter it, and summon a 1/1 kitty for your opponent. First off, aww, look at the little kitty. That aside, this card keeps with the basic trends of what we would expect from Hearthstone in terms of power. It costs 1 less mana than Counterspell, and it gives 1/1 in stats. Fairly standard, but the factor of including a small 1/1 body in the counter effect relieves an element of the counter's frustrating effect. Playing a spell doesn't feel like a complete waste, because at least you get an adorable little guy. Yes he is, yes he is. Anyways, this lack of frustration makes Magical Kitty a much more fun card than Counterspell overall, while maintaining balance and usefulness. Next up, we have That Didn't Happen. 0-mana mage spell, restart your turn without this card. Now this is a fascinating concept. When most people think of counters, they imagine negating the effects your opponent has played previously. This card instead counters all of the effects that happened on your turn perfectly. When something negative occurs on your turn, be it a secret activation you didn't expect, or an RNG effect working counter to your desires, this card can undo it. In the case of secrets, this instead becomes a case of card knowledge, but in the latter case you're countering the effects of, well, the random number generator. Hearthstone loves integrating this third mindless player into the game often, but this card allows you to directly counter the effects of that source. That's very intriguing. In terms of power, this card also serves as a regulator. If you have an effect that sometimes works and sometimes doesn't, this card ups the probability of it working. This makes it much more of a turnaround card than it is a power card, though certain cards such as Tinkmaster Overspark would delight in the effect that this card could provide. Then again, cards like Tinkmaster Overspark rarely see play, so perhaps that's a fever dream. Oh, by the way, it appears that Toki Time Tinker's hero power in the new Monster Hunter mode that's coming out soon is identical to this effect. Play around with it there, and perhaps Blizzard will release a card like this in the future. Finally, we have Winslow Timebank. 5-mana 3/4 mage legendary minion. Battlecry, choose an action in the history bar, undo it. A lot of you are probably scratching your heads, so allow me to explain. Your opponent casts a spell, it's back in their hand and its effect is reverted. Minions slain or revived, minions summoned cease to exist. Basically, it didn't happen. It was simply undone. Even with that explanation, this card's nature inherently creates paradoxical moments. Let's take the simplest example. You play the coin to play this, and undo the casting of the coin. The result is that you would get the coin back in your hand and have -1 mana, which isn't a thing. Negative mana doesn't exist. So already this card's unique design is creating cracks, but if we Occam's razor the odd cases, it becomes comprehensible. -1 mana becomes 0 mana, damage is reverted if the character is still alive, cards that are returned to hand only if they are able to be, etc. Surely with the right design this card is still acceptable, right? Well, then we run into another problem, the fact that this card can undo anything. Any control paladin player knows the frustration of getting their Tyrion sapped. Well, now imagine the frustration of getting your N'Zoth and its battlecry removed. That's your entire turn, gone because of this card. High power effects, both minions and spells, would fall to this card without the specificity that SAP requires. This card would therefore break down the use of any high mana cards, which is very troubling. Perhaps this is why Blizzard has been careful when it comes to printing counter cards, with most of them having a perceivable weakness. Being able to counter a card so thoroughly that there is no upside to playing it doesn't make for a very fun game. Do you have an idea for a way to make countering or undoing effects more fun? If so, send me a tweet, @PennilessPriest, #cardcounters. Use the website linked in the description to help you craft your cards. Here's an example that I came up with. Shut Up. 2 mana rogue spell, Secret. When your opponent plays a Battlecry minion, negate the Battlecry and return the minion to their hand. A nice little sap effect that affects only Battlecry minions. Its acute use makes it more of a tech card, which I am perfectly okay with. I mean, just picture it. Hey Shudderwalk! Shut up! Bonus points in your design if you can use the counter keyword, but you have to make sure that the card is fun and interesting. I look forward to seeing what you come up with. Last week I asked you to tweet me for a #cardknowledge, and my favorite pick goes to @Splodinate, who created Algalon the Observer. 10 mana 5/5, Battlecry, you can see all of your opponent's cards and the order they will be drawn in. For all my praise of card knowledge last episode, this card goes to show its limitations. Is it worth knowing everything about your opponent if they can take advantage of the opening you give them? Is it worth having a 10 mana card that does very little when played, just to know everything about your opponent? It's honestly very hard to gauge, which is why this is interesting. Excellent work. Remember, craft, critique, and have fun. Smile on the just, and I will see you all next time.